y'all know what this is? Let's don't use the word bribe. Let's use the word payola. Do y'all know that I am now diabetic? So all that means is that Powell's trying to kill me. Because it's awfully hard for me to resist. Thank God it wasn't chocolate from Tanner. But see, some people know how to do this. He's got a meeting, so it takes preference over my meeting. Did I go into that yesterday? But he did bring a pie. Mr. Powell gets a check mark. You get 3 check marks. Y'all all know the rules. Y'all bow with me. Gracious and good Heavenly Father, for all that you do for us, we just say thank you. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for taking care of us. Thank you for being with our families. We kind of leave them on their own here for 3 or 4 months. And you guide us and lead us, and that we do things that please you. When we fall, help us up. Lead, guide, and direct us. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, good morning. I can start now, my mentors here. Oh, where's my other one? Oh, Calvin, you're here too, right? Okay. You're a little early for us, aren't you, Calvin? You're a little early, aren't you? Okay, it'd be nice to come in every once in a while on time. Okay, Wall, quick, Mr. Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, I bring before you today HB 723. It's on your back page, first one under structured rule. This is creating a sales tax exemption for poultry veterinary diagnostic labs that are, or lab that is administratively attached to the Department of Agriculture, who's been paying sales tax and sending their money back to the general fund. And I would just appreciate your support.
Lee, is that you or is it Joe?
So let me get, let me get this straight. We got a state lab paying state tax. Who ever thought of that?
They've been in place since 1946,
Yeah.
and somehow or another they've slipped through the cracks and have been paying sales tax all these years.
Okay.
State money.
Good bill.
Thank you.
No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Lumsden.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I bring to you House Bill 592. It's on page 1, item 1, under open rule. This is a bill that removes the sunset provision on self-evaluative privilege, which is something we put in place in 2015 that allowed insurance companies to do a self-evaluation audit. The bill had a sunset provision. It was to give the insurance commissioner's office time to evaluate the program to see if it was working effectively. They say that it is. All this bill does is remove that sunset provision.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Pizzo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 79, modified structure on the first page. This bill simply deals with data obtained using automated license plate reader systems. Says that the data must be purged after 30 months unless it is the subject of an ongoing investigation, and exempts the data from open records requests.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Beskin.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I have today House Bill 654, which is on the first page, halfway down under modified structure. This bill is to implement the requirements of the Child Support Commission, and it would allow, rather than require, judges to use multiple child support worksheets when there's more than one child for whom support is being calculated.
It says no questions. Does that mean everybody in here understands that? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Bonner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today I bring to you House Bill 487. It is the third down under modified structure rule. This is an amendment to the Disaster Volunteer Relief Act, which includes the Civil Air Patrol and gives them the same status that we currently provide our state employees that are part of the Red Cross.
No questions. Thank you. Wait a second. Mr. Coomer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Bonner, in your bill, in reference to how a person is activated, there are a couple references to county declared emergency as opposed to state declared or federally declared emergencies. Is that, you mentioned yesterday that this bill kind of tracks along other provisions in the law that allow for these kinds of activations and paid leave. Do those other provisions also have this county piece in it?
They do. It's a coordination between that county emergency management, Georgia emergency management, and then the individual department head of that individual within the state.
Thank you.
No more questions. Thank you. Well, you're gone anyway. Anybody got a question? Anybody can go back. Mr. Rhodes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I bring before you House Bill 782. It is at the top of the page as you turn it over at the top. House Bill 782 is a slight modification and a little cleanup language on the PDMP bill that we passed last year. In this bill, what it does is it allows law enforcement and PDMPs from other states to be able to share information with a search warrant or a subpoena. And it also allows the EHR, which is the electronic health records, to be combined into one system for the doctor, so they're not having to run back and forth between multiple systems. And the cleanup language is currently nurses and the unlicensed delegates are required to register with the Board of Pharmacy, also with the Department of Public Health. And this bill just lets them streamline that process and register through the Department of Public Health. And that, Mr. Chairman, is the crux of the bill.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I ask for your favorable consideration.
Ms. Price.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I bid you good morning, and I bring you this morning House Bill 668, which is third down under modified open. I came into the clerk's office just at the right time, got 668 instead of the earlier one. This bill actually solves a problem, which is the gap between a petitioner for guardianship at the age of 18 having to wait until the proposed ward turns 18 in order to apply for the guardianship. And this would allow them to petition anytime in the preceding year and with the guardianship to take effect when the proposed ward turns 18. And there have been a number of people in our body who have had this a problem when they've tried to keep their guardianships without any gap in a person who's expected to need a guardian at the time they turn 18. I'd be happy to try to answer questions.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 734, modified open, is just a code revision bill. Insurance code hadn't been looked at since, I think, 1960, so it kind of modernizes that. Anybody have any questions? No, that was somebody else. A separate. Okay, Katie.
Ms. Dempsey. Ms. Dempsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 646, the fourth down under modified structure. This is a bill to...
What? Wait a minute. I'm still doing Smith's. Right, let me back up. He's got two.
Yeah. Sorry, I've got two bills. Okay, that's okay.
Let's go. We were talking about 734. Anybody got a question about 734? No question. All right, Mr. Smith.
Okay, second bill is House Bill 678. This brings transparency to the billing process, addresses billing dates, and also has a section on dispute resolution for surprise medical bills.
Any questions? Now, Ms. Dempsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Under modified structure, fourth down, HB 646, this is a continuation of the bariatric pilot that has been in existence already. We finished 2 years of the program. This does have some changes to how it will take place, actually. The date certain is in there on line 21 for it to begin, January 2019, so there's time to pull it together. It will be a 3-year pilot, allowing a very fixed number of people to apply to go through the process. You will see on line 33 through 46. They're very profound issues. It's not for someone who just wants to look better but is experiencing a comorbidity or another challenge to their health because of their weight. There have been some great success already found in the 2-year program, but we need to study it a little more. At the same time, it allows us to truly help many who have worked in our government sector who are overweight. There is a large percentage of existing and retired state employees who are very obese, and they're very expensive to take care of in other ways if we don't begin to address that. So this is very specific. One other change that's in there will allow for a post-secondary institution to be the follow-up and data manager of this program rather than the department itself. That will give us a lot of more specific data to look into to see if this can be considered to be reinstated one day.
Any questions? Wendell, you sure you don't have a question? Madam Chair. Oh, yeah, he does. Okay. Members, Mr. Williams, since you hadn't got your button pushed, you want to push it?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring before you HB 739. We passed it out of rules unanimously last year. Run it back through to name it after the wife of a former commanding general. Her name is Tracy Rainey, who was so instrumental, and we visited the Pentagon this past summer. This was the most talked about bill there, and they talked about how much they appreciate this bill particularly, and I just want to name it the Tracy Rainey bill.
Any questions? Mr. Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the first page, modified structure at the bottom, 2 bills, House Bill 751 that I brought yesterday, Georgia Emergency Communications Authority, just revamps and modernizes the 911 system. And today, House Bill 757, this is a taxi cab modification. Back a few years ago, we deregulated the taxi limousine industry in Georgia. And the only thing that was left was a couple of the jurisdictions that had medallions. Well, this does is clarifies that they can still do business as long as they're still in compliance with state law. It gives a definition for soft taxi meters. That's your electronic telephone type things, the way that some of the ride-sharing companies use, and allows their use. It also requires on taxi cabs and limos, requires an ID card to be visibly present in that vehicle so that the patrons can see what they've got. And then lastly, there's been some rules that's been orchestrated about the age of the vehicles, and they won't allow any vehicle over 7 years of age, and we're stretching that to 8 years because it's kind of ridiculous given the good vehicles that they're basically casting aside, so that these companies can use up to an 8-year-old vehicle to work the airport.
Go back to 751.
Yes, sir.
Is that creating a new authority?
The authority would be administratively attached to GEMA.
We had a little trouble last year with the 911 bill that didn't make it across the governor's desk.
Yes, sir.
Does that? What?
Yes, sir.
Wait a second. Look at my eye. I don't care. Oh, okay. Do you agree with Mr. Willard that if it gets through here, it will be signed?
That's my understanding. Last year, this was an administration bill, and it passed, and it set up a separate authority last year that would stand on its own weight. And the governor vetoed their own bill last year because they had second thoughts about a better way of doing it, and that was to take, instead of a freestanding authority, have an authority and a board for the 911. It would be assigned and administratively attached to GEMA. That plus the fact that the revenues that's collected would be sent to the Revenue Department, and they would disperse those fees to the 154 jurisdictions.
Okay. Any other questions of Mr. Powell? Mr. Fleming.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I mentioned to you yesterday that when we passed this bill last year, it originally didn't have any appointments for our speaker to this new authority that you were discussing.
I can't hear you. Go again.
All right, let me try again. Mr. Chairman, I mentioned to you yesterday when we passed this bill last year, it originally had no appointments for our speaker, and we amended it to add a couple on the board, and I have a simple amendment to do that this year again, if you'll allow me to offer it at the appropriate time.
Well, it's modified structure, so...
It would be for vote on the floor, Mr. Chairman.
All right, there will be an amendment.
Keith's got the copies, and I got the 0-1 right here for him.
It'll be... we'll have it Monday.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Ms. Hughley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to have you consider Mr. Wilkinson's bill, even though he has the most unlucky number of 666. It is a good bill, and I would hope that you would give it consideration.
Anybody else? Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to put my name by HB 782, Representative Rhodes' bill, and also HB 487, Representative Bonner's bill.
What was the second one?
487, Bonner.
Ms. Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to put my name by House Bill 487. That's the Disaster Volunteer Relief Act. That was passed in 1997, and need is this new addition because we're having more disasters, and anytime our state employees that are qualified can go and get experience in those disasters, it helps if the same thing occurs in our state.
Mr. Caldwell. Mr. Hawkins. Mr. Hawkins.
I'd like to put my name next to the chicken bill, 723, taxing on chickens, and then the PDM bill, 782, PDMP cleanup bill.
Okay. That's it. All right. We're going to set the calendar for Monday. Under open rule, HB 592. Move in a second. All those in favor say yes. All right, it's on. Wait a second. Anybody opposed can say no. Okay, it's on. Thank you, Earl. Modified open. HB 734. And since he's sitting right up here, all those in favor signify by aye. Any opposed? It's on. Modified open. HB 739. What? Did everybody move on that one? Mr. Williams, you want them to vote, or you feeling lucky? All those in favor signify by aye. Opposed, same sign. It's on. Okay. Under modified structure, HB 487. All those in favor signify by yes. Any opposed, same sign. It's on. Under modified structure, HB 678. Have a move in a second. All those in favor signify by aye. Opposed, same sign. It's on. Under structured, the chicken veterinary diagnosis 723. All those in favor squawk like a chicken. Okay.
Beverly was opposed to that one.
Mr. Beverly, you can't squawk? Okay. All those opposed hoot like an owl. I don't know. I'm not flying by the seat of my britches up here. Okay, it's on. And that's enough. Mr. Chastain.